Los Angeles. You know, we usually picture the bright lights, the glamour, that sort of endless sunshine vibe. A city built on dreams, really. But back in July, on a quiet Tuesday morning, that image just shattered. A really profound tragedy cast this huge shadow. So today, we're doing a deep dive into how a city like LA copes when something truly heartbreaking and unexpected happens. The incident itself, it was incredibly jarring, just before rush hour really kicked in. Reports started flooding in this massive explosion near Koreatown, a busy area, lots of homes, businesses, and then you saw it thick black smoke just pouring into the sky. You could see it for miles. A really terrifying sight against that blue backdrop.
Yeah, and the thing that jumps out right away is what they initially suspected caused it. A gas leak,
Mm.
igniting into this aging apartment complex. And it wasn't just some small building. We're talking over 40 families living there, plus several small businesses on the ground floor.
40 families.
hmm And that word aging is key here. The older buildings, they often have the original infrastructure pipes, wiring, stuff that doesn't necessarily meet today's safety codes. New buildings get checked constantly, upgraded, but older ones, sometimes they're grandfathered in, which basically means, well, it means less scrutiny.
Creating a hidden vulnerability.
Exactly. A vulnerability that you often only discover when something catastrophic like this happens. And this was catastrophic. The fire was immediate, overwhelming. The building started collapsing really fast, which made rescue operations just incredibly dangerous, even though help arrived super quickly.
Within minutes, yeah.
But it was almost instant devastation.
And, beyond those really dramatic visuals, the smoke, the collapsed building, this was fundamentally a human tragedy. Our sources, they paint this picture of immediate horror right there on the street. People running out, some filming on their phones, instinctively. Others just desperate, trying to call loved ones they knew lived or worked there. Just chaos. Heartbreaking.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? How does a city this huge, this spread out, this diverse, how does it even begin to process a shock like that? So that's our mission for this deep dive. We want to unpack the layers, not just what happened on that Tuesday morning, but also the human cost, which was immense, how the community responded immediately and longer term. And maybe most importantly, those really uncomfortable questions that surface pretty fast about, could this have been prevented? Who's accountable?
Okay. Yeah, let's definitely unpack this. Let's try and understand the full story here.
Mm-hmm.
So when the first responders got there into that absolute chaos, what were the biggest immediate challenges, and what did those first few hours tell them about the explosion itself?
The challenges were immense. Right off the bat, the building was incredibly unstable.
Yeah.
Sources really highlighted how fast it was collapsing, which you can imagine severely limited what search and rescue could even attempt initially. They had to secure the area first, while trying to figure out if anyone could possibly be alive in what was essentially a pile of burning rubble.
A nightmare scenario.
Absolutely. And the investigation, even in those early stages, started pointing towards a combination of things, which later proved accurate. There was definitely a major gas leak, probably a corroded pipe down in the basement somewhere. Old infrastructure, like we said. But the suspected trigger, what likely ignited it, was an electrical arc from faulty wiring. Again, old wiring. Maybe damaged by water, maybe just worn out over decades.
So it wasn't just one thing failing, it was multiple system failures,
Yeah.
tied to the building just being old and possibly neglected.
Precisely. It created this perfect tragic storm.
But then, as the dust literally settled, a much more disturbing picture started to emerge from the investigations, didn't it? A story about warnings being missed, complaints being ignored. What did the sources uncover there?
Yeah, this is where it gets really unsettling. We looked into city records, talked to people, read testimonies, and there's a pattern, a clear pattern of what looks like systemic negligence. For instance, we found records, documented evidence of at least 7 separate complaints just in the last 2 years about a strong, persistent gas smell in the hallways, common areas.
7 complaints.
7. And in most of those cases, the property management company's response was basically logged as investigated, no action required. But seemingly without any follow-up from a city inspector to actually verify that.
Wow.
And it wasn't just gas smells. There were other complaints too. Flickering lights, circuit breakers, tripping all the time. People even reported small electrical fires in their apartments. All signs pointing to wiring problems. So these weren't just one-off things. It really painted a picture of a management company that seemed to be consistently downplaying or dismissing serious safety issues. Probably, to avoid paying for expensive repairs.
That is just incredibly frustrating and infuriating, frankly. So this wasn't just a lapse by one company. It sounds like maybe a broader issue, a regulatory gap. How could those complaints just get brushed aside like that? What does that tell us about how the city oversees these older buildings?
It really does shine a light on the cracks in the system. Beyond that grandfathering issue we mentioned, our sources pointed to a few weaknesses. For one, there seemed to be a lack of regular proactive inspections specifically for these older apartment complexes. It was mostly complaint-driven.
So if no one complained loudly enough? Or if the complaint wasn't followed up properly?
Exactly. If the property manager just ticked a box saying resolved, without an independent check, the file often just got closed. Plus, there were mentions of budget cuts impacting the number of city inspectors. Understaffing, making it hard to keep up with complaints, let alone do routine checks. It effectively created a loophole, one that it appears this specific management company might have exploited.
Right. So amidst all this, the tragedy, these really troubling revelations, we also saw something else. We saw LA's resilience. How did the city, which can feel so fragmented sometimes, manage to come together in response to this?
It was actually quite powerful to see, despite LA's size, its sprawl, all the different communities, there was this undeniable sense of unity in the grief. Candlelight vigils popped up almost immediately. Huge gatherings downtown at Grand Park, but also smaller ones, very local, in Koreatown, Westlake, Boyle Heights, the areas most affected, but also beyond. People painted murals, almost overnight it seemed, honoring the victims. 17 lives lost, including children, elderly residents, even a firefighter caught in the response.
17 people.
And local churches, temples, community centers held services in different languages, English, Spanish, Korean, offering comfort, a place for people to just be together and mourn. It really showed that beneath the surface of this huge metropolis, there's a strong community fabric. People found ways to connect, to support each other.
And that shared grief, it seemed to turn pretty quickly into a demand for answers, for accountability.
For
action.
action.
Right. What steps were taken? By the city? By the community?
Absolutely. The grief fueled this real push for accountability. Mayor Carmen Lopez was particularly vocal, very forceful. Almost immediately, a criminal investigation was launched, looking directly at the management company, their practices, their records.
Okay.
And on the policy side, things moved fast in the city council. New legislation was fast-tracked, aimed at really overhauling building safety rules and how inspections work across the city. We're talking proposals for things like mandatory regular inspections for all older multi-unit buildings, not just waiting for complaints, and creating a tougher system for verifying that complaints are actually fixed independently. And alongside that, practically speaking, a relief fund was set up. It raised millions very quickly for the families who lost everything, for the victims' relatives, showing real commitment to help right away.
So as we kind of wrap up this dip dive, the key takeaway, really driven home by Mayor Carmen Lopez's words, was that this wasn't just fate. She called it a tragedy not just born of fate, but of failure. Failure of oversight, of regulation, of corporate accountability. And the sources back that up, this chilling pattern. Ignored gas smells, faulty wiring complaints, poor maintenance brushed off for years.
That's right, a failure with devastating consequences. But, amidst that, it's also a testament to the city's spirit. How Los Angeles, even with all its complexities, found that unity in mourning. Those vigils, the murals, the multilingual services in Grand Park, Koreatown, Westlake, Boyle Heights. They weren't just gestures. They were, I think, the start of a collective healing process and a demand for real change, and the city did respond. With the criminal investigation pushing for new safety laws, the relief fund showing both compassion and a new resolve.
And it feels different, doesn't it? Compared to, say, an earthquake or a wildfire, which are forces of nature we kind of expect here. This tragedy hit differently because it felt so preventable, rooted in human neglect. That sense of injustice seemed particularly strong. It turned it from just a terribly sad event into this really painful memory, but also, like you said, a catalyst, an urgent call to action.
Yeah, and if you think about the bigger picture, it really highlights what you might call the city's vulnerable human core. It's a stark reminder, isn't it, that we need constant protection, constant vigilance, even in our ordinary, everyday urban spaces. It kind of forces us to look beneath the surface, to think about the systems, the regulations, the inspections, the corporate responsibilities that are supposed to keep us safe, and what happens when they fail.
So the city has vowed, never again, that this kind of negligence won't go unchecked. And it's healing through remembering, through trying to reform, through that solidarity we saw. But it leaves us, and maybe you listening, with some lingering thoughts. What lessons can we really draw from a tragedy like this, one born from neglect? How does something like this change how we think about our collective responsibility for making sure our communities are safe from harm that can be prevented.
And maybe taking it a step further, what can you, as someone who's now heard this story, actually do? How can we ensure that the call to action that comes out of these terrible events truly leads to lasting, meaningful change? Not just in LA, but right where you live. Something to really think about.